Welcome. We're here to discuss installing Latitude 8.0. And you can see I've got my installation package here, but there's a couple of things we want to check out first. And the first one is the IP address of the machine that we're going to install this on. So you can see right here, I have my address set to 192.168.0.15. Secondly, we can check the Windows firewall. When we're doing installations, just like any VMS, we generally want to turn off that Windows firewall while we're doing that installation. And we can come down to properties here and then change the startup type to disabled, and then simply stop and apply and OK, and to get that out of the way. Now we can turn that back on, of course, after the fact, but when it's establishing all of its connections, we want to make sure that it has not being impeded. So with those two things, let's go ahead and launch Latitude 8.0. Now you'll notice I sped this up a little bit because sometimes it takes a good deal of time more than we need to talk about here. But this is an important message here. This file must be put where it's put when it's installed and not moved. You can see the installation initializes up on the top, and this again takes a couple of minutes, so I've sped it up a little bit here so we can see the next step or the first step that we come to, and that should be the .NET installation. You can see right here, this one actually tells us that it could possibly take up to an hour just to install that, so of course we do not have time for that. And I have just advanced a little bit forward to show you what you're going to be looking at. This is the .NET install. And again, I've accelerated the speed on this one and just gone to the end right here. And you can see after the .NET install, it almost completes at the top and it's done. And the very next thing, of course, would be some Directx. We do some installation here. Again, this is very simple. You simply follow through the instructions. It walks you right through. And this should take us to the next section, which wants us to reboot. So that's what I've done. You can see here I have restarted already ahead of time. Got a little bit of visual sort of things up at the top right there, but we do have to accept the EULA terms. Let me get rid of that right here. There we go. And just hit next. After we read the entire thing, we could move it somewhere else or just install where it's default located. Here's a series of languages, and of course, that you can choose from. Now here we have a series of options. If I just wanted to install Admin Center and Control Center on this particular machine, just an operator machine, I could do that. We have server installation right here, which you can see if I was just installing a directory and an archiver possibly, or just a directory with some web services itself, or even maybe just an archiver. I could simply use these as well. But we have two other choices here. This one is the all-in-one installation, of course, and when you choose the all-in-one installation, you'll see you don't get any options to see because it is an all-in-one. So it's going to install everything as described and moves right on to the sequel. So let's go back. What I like to use is the custom installation, which allows us then to be able to choose or pick and choose from any of these options. And you can see there's a series of clients, servers, and other. And at the top, we've got Admin Center and Control Center. In the servers, we have the three main components, the archiver, directory, and EDB, which you can see me here talking about here. And then we have a couple of other functions. The gateway, you can see what it's talking about on the right, what that's about, getting in from the outside to your system. And then we have below the gateway is the transcoder. You can see over here it's used for moving data across to different segments of the network. And mobile viewing apps as well. And that's important to talk about because these web services, which are listed right here, are dependent on that transcoder. So the web services, if you're going to install those, make sure you do have yourself the transcoder installed as well. And now if we look a little bit below here, we can see in our other section, also mapping is in the web services, but in the other, we have our SDK and our application server. But we also have this mentor application, which is pretty unique. It allows you to record the operator machines, could be used great for training after the fact. We're not going to install that. Now, when you get to the SQL installation, which again takes a little bit of time, if you have an existing central server, you just reach out, point it to the address there, but we don't, so we're just going to install the 2002 Express version. And just go next right here. We could update our multicast address if that was required just to start with, but we're just going to go ahead forward. You can go back and review some of those if you want with the back button, but if you just click install, it then begins the installation. I've accelerated this. Here's our SQL install just to see. I wanted to show you what you would see opening up. You can see I've really accelerated it here. It's installing all the individual components that we've checked in the installation package. And it will, I got it, I think, at 10 times fast, so you can see each thing that it goes through. And we come down here to the Launch Admin Center. So let's go ahead and hit Finish with that box checked, and it will launch our Admin Center sign-on application. All right, you can see right here, we've identified our IP address. We had to reboot, so that's gone now, but it was 192.168.0.15. And the first thing we're going to see is a request to license this version of the software that we installed. So you can see here's our activation key. I've got that blocked. We just generate a report, a request. You can see the request file here. I'm just going to go ahead and throw it right on my desktop because we use that for the second part of the process later. Once the file is down there at the bottom, of course, you can see we have to go now to our easy Latitude 8 portal for licensing. We come right to our division, our security division. Under support, you can see right here under tools and services, it is license activation. Here's for the existing 7.0 versions out there. And here's where we activate the new 8.0 version. And it walks you right through it, right? It shows the instructions up on top. We've already got a file request on our desktop, so we simply grab that and place it into this dropdown. And then we go down to upload file and we upload it. Now, once we upload that file, you'll see, boom, here in a second, we then get the download license file link right down at the bottom, and that's the license file we're going to need to plug into Latitude. So we're just going to go ahead and click on the download license file. It is a bin file notice. You could save it wherever we'd like. We're going to go up to our desktop here and just throw it there so we can find it easily. And then we simply come back to our Latitude system and we browse to that license file that we've just created. And there she is, the bin file. We simply open it and then it install license right down at the bottom. This will launch our quick install wizard, which is one of the things that I like about Latitude. It sort of walks you right through the installation process, the setup process, right? We just did the installation. And you can see our quick configuration wizard right here walks you step by step through all of these steps. Note that you don't have to do anything. You could just hit a bunch of next and then go into the system and configure everything. But the quick configuration wizard gets all the important things, the core things out of the way, and then you can go into each camera and set them up. So you can see right at the top, we start with our default Ntp server. I think it's very wise to have a centralized server for all your components. Here is the time zone and the type of video, or the PAL, NTSC, depending on where you're at. You have different stream types we can choose there. And then for these right here in the logical view, we don't want to clamor it up with too much stuff. So we're just going to check that video. And it was by default. So we didn't change anything on that screen. And here we're adding an archiver. And it creates another little wizard within the quick installation wizard. And we're just going to call it, archiver 18 for whatever reason. And because this is on one machine, we're going to use the same IP as our directory. But if this was another machine, of course, we'd have to put that address in here. And we click next. Now the network itself, we have to tell Latitude where our cameras reside, which subnets of the network your cameras reside. So we do that by clicking on add. And the base IP address is just identifying the subnet, the 192.168.0. Now you can see to identify that subnet, we're just going to give it a sort of false IP address, and we're going to put a 0 in the last octet, which of course is not a real IP address, simply identifying the first 3 octets there as the subnet. We put in our class 3 subnet here with 3 255s and a 0, and then the gateway we're using is the 192.168.0.1. And we just hit next, or OK, excuse me, at the bottom. Now here, if I had another network, notice this is identifying that base address. If I wanted something, say at 192.168.1 on a subnet, I would simply click add and do another thing that we just did. But we're just going to go ahead and check this one and hit next. If everything is correct and your IP address to the archiver is correct, what it's doing now is it's looking for all of the storage drives on the archiver, and there they are. And we recommend the 64 KB block size, and that's why you should recommend there because of this 64 KB block size. So we've identified that drive E is the one we want to use, and then we simply identify that, based on what I was talking about, and click add at the top, where we can then add in that E drive and actually utilize the drive. So here we choose it from our menu. There's our path. We could change that. Now the storage recommendation is 1 gigabyte less per terabyte stored, basically. So in this example, we have a very small machine. So we're going to take 1 gigabyte less than the total, just to give us that little bit of overhead that we need. We don't want to use it all up and get Windows messages all the time. Now the 80 megabyte containers work perfectly with that 64 KB block size, but the size of this is going to alarm the machine because it's not the normal size, so it's just warning us in case we didn't know this, but we do. So we're going to go ahead and say thanks for warning us, but we're just going to say yes and move on. I see this in my training classes a lot because we use non-standard size. Again, I could add additional archivers right here if that's what I wanted to do, simply adding and doing just what we did before on this archiver 18 machine. Let's go to next. Discovery. This is where we go to find the cameras that we need to install in the system. And we generally just would click here. But I first want to look at this Discovery settings window so you can take a look. Notice the top we have OnVIF. Now it's an either or thing. It's either OnVIF or all of these cameras that you see with checkboxes here. These are proprietarily integrated cameras, directly integrated into our system. So again, you could either use OnVIF, which is the universal standard, what we're trying to do, or one of our integrated cameras. And you can see right here under the FLIR setting, there used to be different settings, one for each type of camera, but we've consolidated them all into one file. So it's nice and easy. You don't have to choose the individual one, but you still could. Now, another thing to note right here, if your username and password on your camera is not what it is in their manual, right out of the box, you need to come and change this here. Otherwise, the system will not find the camera without the correct username and password. So let's go ahead and click on our automatic discovery, and you should see the cameras pop up here in just a second. All right, now you can see all of the 4 cameras that I have in the system have been found. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the discovery and just notice that they're all listed here and all my sequential IP addresses, which is how I've done them. It gives me the model number and the firmware version of each one of those cameras. That's kind of nice. And the IP addresses, again, as I mentioned, along with the MAC addresses. So let's go ahead and hit next. Now here's where I would attach the units to the particular archiver. If I had more than one archiver, I would just attach maybe a couple of these to that first archiver and go to next, and then the other 2 that I didn't check would be remaining and then go on to the next archiver. But for my example, I only do have the one, archiver 18. I'll attach them to that same archiver. Once they're attached to the archiver, this is a quality screen that we don't use anymore. We actually use it from inside the system after this. And then we congratulate you for finishing the wizard. Now you can see when we first get here, the cameras, a couple of them are not accessible. It said 3 there in a second ago. Now it's down to 1. It does take a second or 2 for those cameras to actually come up online. You can see them coming online here in my physical view. When I expand each one of these camera settings, you can see the redness is going away quickly on each one of them as the connections are established. And then you'll see when I come back to the globe itself in the top left, the system, those cameras are now all accessible. They're not recording because I haven't done that yet, but we can see all as well.